So both of them in excellent positions to make a top 8 run. If they can get 4 wins during today, that should be good enough to make it into the top 8. And with that, we'll begin. Andy Ferguson is going to be on the play for game 1. Starts the game off on Prairie Stream.
Now, I have to imagine that being on the play is a pretty significant advantage for Andy's deck. Yeah, and this is what Andy really needs to be doing in the early turns, is landing his more vanilla creatures, the Sylvan Advocate into Deathmist Raptor, and then when Joe actually gets a creature on the table, you Krasis it, you Reflector Mage it, and just beat down until he's just dead, can't do anything.
Turn 2 Sylvan Advocate is going to be the play for Andy Ferguson. So he is first onto the board as we go back over toward Joe. Joe with an interesting take here on Abzan. Only 12 creatures in the main deck. Rhinos, Sylvan Advocates, and Anafenzas. Outside of that, he has a large number of kill spells. And that Planeswalker plus Secure the Wastes package that we've seen out of, I guess the Hoagland Black-White deck.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong package. Planeswalkers are obviously very powerful cards, so including them in your deck, generally a good idea.
Silkwrap's going to take care of the Sylvan Advocate. I'll keep the board clear. We go back over to Andy Ferguson. See a copy of Warden of the First Tree and Reflector Mage in his hand. He's going to play Warden and then immediately pump it while he has Joe tapped out.
And the Yava Maya Coast in Ferguson's list, I don't believe it actually produces colorless mana meaningful anywhere in the 75. That's actually just a good land to have in the deck, so no matter reshapers here.
Yeah, and that's something we actually saw a fair amount of yesterday, both out of Jim Davis's Teamer Company deck, and then we did have that blue-green tempo deck, and both of them were on 4 copies of Matter Reshaper.
Mm-hmm. It's a little more difficult to pull off the colorless splash in one of the ally color 3-color pairs because you only have access to 1 pain land that's actually on color.
So despite that early pump on the Warden of the First Tree, making it into a 3-3 there for Andy meant he paid a price with Abzan Charm. He was then able to exile the Warden. So we go back to Andy's 4th turn, and so far, Joe doing, I guess, what you'd expect out of a control deck here, just playing a kill spell every turn.
Yep, that's exactly what Joe wants to be doing here. And Andy's a little stuck on lands, so not even at the 4 for Collected Company yet. If that does not come to bear, these 1-for-1 removal spells, follow up by Planeswalkers and or Siege Rhinos out of Joe is going to be tough for Andy to overcome.
4th land for Joe. We'll see if it is that Rhino waiting here. Looks like it's going to be Murderous Cut, Delving 4. And it does take care of a Den Protector, the card you want to cut, and followed up by Anafenza the Foremost.
That's probably exactly perfect for Joe on this turn, stopping Den Protector from flipping up on Andy's next turn and getting a threat on the table.
Well, there is a bit of a, I'm a little surprised that Joe didn't play the Anafenza first.
That's a good point.
So that Den Protector wasn't in the graveyard here. But I do agree that Anafenza plus Murderous Cut here, that's a great turn for him.
Yeah. On the table, it was great, though leaving the Den Protector to get picked up by any further copies could be a bit of a misstep.
Yeah, Reflector Mage is the play for Ferguson as he hits his 4th land. It will bounce the Anafenza back into Joe's hand. And that play in particular, Reflector Mage on cards like Anafenza, these 3 and 4 drops with no enter the battlefield abilities, that's just been impressive. We saw that yesterday out of company decks.
Mm-hmm. And this is exactly the kind of effect that Ferguson's deck is built to take advantage of. Not just Reflector Maging, again, also bounding Crasising. So if he's able to stick this creature and the next creature, and Joe just is playing 1 creature at a time, might not be too hard for Andy to punch through.
Yeah, bounce a guy, tap a guy. And a lot of pressure here.
In Bernal's hand, we see a copy of Sorin, which would be a great follow-up to Anafenza if it was still on the board. Against a 2-3, though, not very impressive. So you would see the Sorin come down. Can't really do anything meaningful. A 2-2 doesn't matter here, and then the Sorin's just dead to the Reflector Mage.
Yeah, so Sorin, Joe is going to try to keep it alive. He'll tick it up to 5. That ability to give his creatures lifelink. Not going to do anything with no cards on the board. But Joe's banking on the fact that Andy won't be able to kill the Sorin this turn. And it doesn't look like he will. Reflector Mage will hit Sorin down to 3, but that's going to be it for Andy. He'll go ahead and pass the turn. Well, seems like he'll pass the turn with 4 mana up.
Yeah, Andy has previously missed a land drop. There's no way that he doesn't have at least a Bounding Crisis here, but I would expect a Collected Company.
That all creature 4 mana up, you know,
Yeah.
you're like, ah.
Andy also does have 2 copies of Ojutai's Command in his deck, which if he has it on this Anafenza, that's a pretty good swing.
Oh, wow. And there you have it. So Joe going for Anafenza, and Ojutai's Command is going to get back Den Protector as well after countering the spell. So it does come back to get Joe that Den Protector was in the graveyard.
It does, yeah. You know, now there's a 2-1 in play. Might just be better to go for that board presence over drawing a card. The Sylvan Advocate will be able to block it, but yeah, it's still more board presence that he could have otherwise had. And another Reflector Mage or a Bounding Crisis here will leave his Sorin dead on the table.
Yeah, now Sylvan Advocate, because of Joe's 6 lands, is now a 4/5 here. So he'll play. Joe's going to go ahead and -2 the Sorin, make a Vampire token.
It's not surprising to see Joe Bernal playing Sylvan Advocate. He has cast quite a lot of Tarmogoyfs in his life.
Yeah, so how do you like that comparison? I mean, I get it that on that turn when you tapped 2 mana and played a 4/5 or 2, okay, that felt like a Tarmogoyf.
If we're talking about casting Tarmogoyf in Modern and Legacy, the comparison is completely disingenuous. But you have to remember how good Tarmogoyf was when it was in the Standard. There were no fetch lands at that point in time. It was often a 2/3 on turn 2. Still a perfectly serviceable card to have in your deck, maxed out at about 4/5.
Yeah, Sylvan Advocate does have Vigilance, so it even has a slight upgrade there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not unlikely it'll translate as well as Tarmogoyf into older formats.
Right. You know, I am not telling you that if you can't afford Tarmogoyf that you should put Sylvan Advocates in your Modern deck.
That one's not going to work out as well.
No, I certainly do not recommend that.
He might get lightning bolted.
Yes.
That could happen.
Also, if you're drawing 6 lands in Modern, not necessarily going to be a great game for you.
Well, you should be scape shifting people at that point if you're going to have 6 lands.
Yeah, attack for 4 is not a great precursor to scape shift.
Well, sometimes you have to get them below 18. And, you know, maybe Sylvan Advocate's the man for that job.
You can count on Sakura Tribe Elder.
All right, and it is the Collected Company on end step here. No surprise. And it looks like we do see Bounding Crassus. 3 copies of Jace.
So Andy probably won't be taking more than 1 of those. And he does go with the 1.
He goes with the 1.
Smart
and
call.
takes Bounding Crassus. And that will tap down the Advocate.
And of course.
It looks like that was actually, no, that was a main phase Collected Company. I'll correct me. So Bounding Crassus used there to falter past.
Yeah, and I like Andy's line here of pressuring the Sorin. You can't meaningfully win a damage race against a card that provides so much potential life gain, especially on this Vigilance creature that maintains lifelink on Andy's turn, though Bernal had the Murderous Cut to stop that.
Yeah, some Murderous Cut took care of one of the two power creatures, Sylvan the Vampire token trading with the other.
Now that I'm seeing this in play, I actually really like this interaction between these 2 cards in Bernal's deck. The Vigilance on the Advocate, yes.
Yeah.
This is actually very impressive. You know, he's threatening to gain 10 life a turn, assuming he's able to block, you know, at least 5 on the initial attack.
So the swing will gain Joe 5 life. He's back up to 19. Plays out the last card in his hand. It's a copy of Murderous Cut to take care of Ferguson's Jace. So Joe ahead on the board, but he's definitely down on cards. Everything Joe has is on the table. Looks like Ferguson does have 3 more cards in hand. Among them, Dramoka's Command, but even at this point, that's not enough to get by the Sylvan Advocate.
No, his Lizard is not large enough to battle here. Really just needs another one of those tempo creatures so he can kill Sorin this turn. That's going to be step 1 for this game.
It's a mighty big elf, right? Sylvan Advocate's, I believe, an elf.
Yeah, there are not many elves that get to be that large. Elvish Aberration, I believe, is a 4/5.
Yeah, but he's an aberration, right?
Yeah,
that's the point.
He lives in. I don't remember what the forest was called in the Onslaught block, actually, but there was some issue with the Mirari that caused the elves to mutate.
Well, they were the Wirewood, but I don't know if that's the name of the forest. I think that's the Elf tribe.
Yeah.
Shambling Vent will be the play for Joe Bernal. And for Andy, it's going to put a counter on a Bounding Crassus. And here's the important part. Has Joe sacrifice an enchantment, so the Sylvan Advocate that was previously Silk Wrapped will come back into the battlefield for Andy.
Andy's 1 land shy of having a 4/5 of his own, but this board position is not looking unfavorable for him.
Well, he can push 7 damage through just by attacking right now. And it's going to be a second Dromoka's command. And this one's huge. Bounding Crassus becomes a 5/5. That'll take down Sylvan Advocate. And here is a swing for 12.
If the first command was good, the second command was great.
Joe at 7. And Andy looks like he's going to go ahead and take game 1 here. He'll send in Lumbering Falls Dust just to be sure. And Joe with Secure the Wastes as his draw. Looks like he'll get another turn.
Yeah, he's going to put 6 1/1s into play, so he has to minimally find a way not to die. So from 7, is there any combination of his creatures that aren't lethal? It looks like you can let through... No, it looks like any 2 of these creatures actually just kill him. So you have to put something in front of everything.
So I wonder if this is a situation where you actually want to show that you're playing Secure the Wastes.
Yeah, he's really relying on the top of his deck to make this matter. He's able to keep 3 tokens in play. So a top deck Sorin would only get him in for 6. He does have the Shambling Vent, but not enough mana to activate it and cast a Sorin.
If he was able to keep... It's possible something like a swing plus a Siege Rhino, and then another chump block. Say his top 2 cards of his deck are 2 Siege Rhinos. He can chump block for 2 consecutive turns on this board.
That is true. So I assume that he's non-zero, but
not by much. Well, it looks like he went to 1. He let the 3/3 Crassus and the 3/3 Lumbering Falls too. Actually, wait, that Lumbering Falls is not a 3/3.
It should have been a 5 given the 6 lands in play. So we're gonna run by see if we can get some clarification on that. We might have life totals incorrect here.
Okay. So life totals are correct here. I think Joe was at 9 on that attack. So he took 5 off the Lumbering Falls and 3 off the Bounding Crassus.
Okay, that changes the dynamic a little bit. Joe is still in a precarious situation.
And here's an alpha again from Ferguson. Lumbering Falls not part of the equation this time.
Heavily suggest something at instant speed here, and probably something that costs at least 3 mana, because you could easily swing the Falls and leave up Dromoka's command here.
Sure. Well, 3 more tokens will jump in front. Joe, at 1 life, is going to have to chump everything. Draws a land, passes turn. And here's another Collected Company. That is exactly the instant you were talking about.
If this game was troublesome before, it's probably just out of reach now.
Death Mist Raptor, Reflector Mage, Bounding Crassus, all available options for Andy.
Yeah, I like Reflector Maging away that token and just gripping the Death Mist Raptor.
Yeah, well, you could also Bounding Crassus, so tap the Shambling Vent here, too.
Yep. It's unlikely that Joe has a winning line that involves activating the Shambling Event, so that decision is kind of minor, though it's probably better.
Yeah, and it looks like we're not even going to get as far as that decision. After seeing the Collected Company, Joe will scoop it, and game 1 goes over to Andy Ferguson with Bant Company. And once again, we see the power of Collected Company plus Reflector Mage really out here in full force. We've seen that sort of play, out of 4-color Rally all of yesterday look very impressive, and Bant Company looking just as good.
Absolutely, and finding 2/3 drops or a particularly good 2-drop off of Collected Company certainly very impactful, and it's all about finding the right mix of the creatures you actually want in your deck, and Bounding Crassus and Reflector Mage combined pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah, that's been excellent. So we'll go ahead and look at the sideboards for both players. So for Joe Bernal, with his control deck, he's going to have to find a different mixture of spells with which he wants to control it. So in his sideboard, he has 2 Duress, 3 Kalitas, 4 Radiant Flames, 2 Surge of Righteousness, and 4 Transgress the Mind. What do we like here?
Well, Radiant Flames is kind of a no-brainer here. You know, Andy's just got a bunch of creatures that die to it, so that should be coming in for sure. Transgress the Mind is fine. You know, you can find most of his creatures. You can find Collected Company, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that coming here as well. Duress is less exciting. He does have a decent mix of instants and sorceries, so you could bring it in, though Transgress is going to be better. Unclear if you actually want that many discard effects. Cletus is bigger than most of Andy's creatures, so I can see that coming in as well.
Yeah, because Cletus as a 3/4 is interesting. Because I've seen Bounding Crassus and Reflector Mage, I want to get away from these 3 and 4 mana creatures that can just be bounced or tapped without any penalty. And Cletus to me is really playing on the border of that.
Yeah, there's some issues with that, though. If we are bringing in the Transgress the Mind, it's easier to know when the coast is clear.
That's fair enough. We'll go ahead and look at Andy's sideboard. We have Arishan Clerics, Disdainful Strokes, Dispels, Frostwalker, Harbinger of the Tides, Silkwrap, and Valorous Stance.
So Joe's deck just has a bunch of Planeswalkers and removal spells, so some number of the counters I like. Disdainful Stroke is definitely going to be good against our opponents that showed us that they're playing Sorin and they're presumably playing Siege Rhino. Dispel's fine. We know that they have Murderous Cuts and Abzan Charms, so I don't hate that one. Silkwrap's not super exciting. The opponent does have Anafenza and Sylvan Advocate, so maybe that one's fine. I like Valorous Sense more than Silkwrap, though, because it serves the purpose of both Dispel and Silkwrap in this matchup.
Fair enough. These players, Joe Bernal, Andy Ferguson, Abzan Aggro versus Bant Company. Game 1 in the books for Bant Company. We'll see if Joe Bernal can come back. Before that, though, we want to talk about the event we're running next weekend. That's the same weekend as the Pro Tour. It's going to be Star City Games Regional Championships. So this is happening for Season 1, February 6th. It's in Modern, and you know, this one's a pretty exciting tournament for me. You get regionals twice a year. These are going to be Modern regionals. So for all players showing up, look at the Ascent of Aya playmat and token. This is going to be for the 200 players showing up at each of them. Now, this is actually part of the SCG Tour. So if you're wanting to make it to get some points, maybe get on our leaderboard, get some buys to the events, or just make it to an invitational, points are given out all the way to every participant. And you can see here, you know, 15 points for first place is no joke, as well as the top 8 players getting an invite to our invitational. So you can find out more about this, getting this playmat and all at starcitygames.com/regionals. Also find the regional championship nearest you. We have them happening at 14 places around the country. So plenty of ways to come and battle.
Yeah, great opportunity to get some Modern reps in. Format just got a big shakeup. Maybe you got a brew you want to test. There's no better place than a big tournament. That's how you know what really works.
All right. Well, we are underway with Game 2. Joe Bernal with his Abzan deck is going to be on the play.
Looks a lot like a Duress here.
Yeah, it looks like he's boarded in some of the Duress package. Those ones not in the main deck. We'll see if he actually hits a creature. There was only 10 spells in the main deck for Andy, but it looks like he has plenty of options. And Andy's hand's a good one. 2 lands, Bounding Crassus, Den Protector, Collected Company, and Disdainful Stroke as well. I believe Sylvan Advocate, the last card.
Stroke is good against Joe, but Collected Company is a 2-for-1. Stroke's just a 1-for-1. Heavy tempo play on Disdainful Stroke, kind of trading 2 mana for 4 mana, but Collected Company just matters too much more. I have to imagine he's taking that.
Yeah, well, if he wants to get into this value grind, which I do think is going to be his strategy, I'm inclined to agree. It's very hard for Joe to match Collected Company.
Though if Joe happens to have a Transgress the Mind, that can take the Company, it can't take the Stroke, so we might see him be thinking about that.
He does have a Siege Rhino hand. And I think that's going to make him take the Disdainful Stroke. Now, there is some upside. Andy's hand only had 2 lands in it. So taking the 2, Collected Company, though a good card, might not be happening on time.
That's true. I don't generally like the idea of banking on my opponent not hitting their lands, because you look really silly when they do.
Yeah.
But there is merit to it.
Well, Joe, right off the top, as though you called it, that's going to be the Transgress the Mind you were looking at.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense now.
Warden of the First Tree was the draw for Andy Ferguson. And quickly, Joe will select the Disdainful Stroke.
And the other upside here, Andy has a Den Protector in his hand. Transgress the Mind actually exiles the Collected Company, so he won't be able to get that back with the Protector.
Oh, wow. Yes, it's actually more important that he takes the... He has to really be careful about which one he takes with which spell. Now, keep in mind, when he duressed, he didn't have a Transgress the Mind. But it is going to pay off for him that the Collected Company's exiled. We saw in the win-in yesterday, Jim Davis really dismantled Joe Lissette's deck with his engine of Den Protectors, getting back collected companies, finding Den Protectors. It got out of hand quickly for Joe's deck.
Mm-hmm. Joe did not have Planeswalkers like Joe does.
Yeah.
So Bernal with the copies of Gideon, with the copies of Sorin, with the copies of Obnixilis, it's a little more difficult to value them out. When we think about Bring to Light being this kind of value deck, but really paying 5 mana for Bring to Light can't search for Planeswalkers. You're not going to get as much raw advantage as just casting a Gideon in a lot of situations.
Turn 3 is going to be an Abzan Charm for Joe. He'll draw 2 with it. I always like that situation. Abzan Charm drew Abzan Charm Swamp. So you're like, okay, looks like we just got a free swamp here. I mean, maybe not free, 3 mana and 2 life.
Well, we can't use it on the Sylvan Advocate just yet anyway, so.
Advocate will hit Joe down to 14.
It's almost like you Vampiric Tutored for another copy of Abzan Charm.
I don't know if I'd want a Vampiric Tutor for Abzan Charm. That's... I feel like we're misassessing our cards at this point.
We also probably should have gotten deck checked by now.
What format are we playing? Are we cubing? And then if we're cubing, why is that my best Vampiric Tutor target?
Yeah, we're playing Vampiric Tutor in an Abzan deck.
So Abzan Charms those cards. It's good because it's so versatile. Tutoring for the versatile card. I don't know. Okay, Siege Rhino is going to be the play for Joe. He'll take 3 life here.
The odds of them reprinting Vampiric Tutor are making this conversation relevant, basically
yeah,
0.
I'm pretty sure they've had a lot of internal discussions about reprinting Vampiric Tutor, you know.
It just comes up every set.
Yeah, like, oh, is it time yet? No,
in
no,
Theros, they chose Thoughtseize as their lose 2 life, 1 black spell instead.
It's going to be Vampiric Tutor in Shadows over Innistrad.
Might be Imperial Seal first. Sorcery speed, yeah.
Bounding Crass is on end step for Ferguson and taps down Siege Rhino. So he's going to be able to crash in for 5. This is not the first Bounding Crassus deck we've seen today.
No, the card's actually a really good rate. In the standard format with less good mana, you might actually just be seeing a lot more of this card.
That's really interesting. They'll swing and put Joe down to 12. Andy will play Lumbering Falls.
Up until most recently, Bounding Crassus was a modern playable card. The Team or Twin decks.
That's
obviously,
true. They did play it. Now, obviously, once you can't put a Splinter Twin on it.
The capacity was a little different what they were doing. There were games where you did just beat down, and 3 power and 3 mana. You know, it scales with Lightning Bolt really well. 7 combinations of attacking with Crassus and Lightning Bolt kills your opponent.
It also scales. I like to say it scales with Lightning Bolt. It's like, well, it also dies to Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, that is the problem.
That is the other half of scaling with Lightning Bolt. A face down morph for Andy Ferguson. He does play Den Protectors and Death Mist Raptors. Though in this kind of matchup, I'd be very surprised if a Death Mist Raptor was face down.
Joe's taking a second to think. I like Andy's asking to see the graveyard in that situation. You know, you're not doing anything.
Wonder if he has a Den Protector.
Yeah. And just, you know, Joe's thinking about something when you're tapped out. Give you something else to look at. Good practice.
So if I go deep into the tank, you're going to look at my graveyard?
Every time.
Every time?
I'm going to ask you how many cards are in your hand once or twice, and look at your graveyard. And then I'll ask you how many cards are in your hand again.
It might have changed.
It probably didn't change, but I might have forgot.
Okay. Gideon will be the play for Joe. And it looks like that one's going to make an ally. It will go for the Knight ally, and he'll pass her back to Andy. Den Protector, Warden of the First Tree. These are options in Andy's hand. He's got a lot of value here. Now, the challenge is going to be breaking through on the ground. You kind of wish he had another Bounding Crassus here.
Or a Reflector Mage. Though that one, the Siege Rhino, when it comes back down, still matters a lot. And with Siege Rhino and Gideon on the table, Den Protector for that Disdainful Stroke back, not super important anymore.
Yeah, the damage has been done here.
Now, Reflector Mage, in addition to Den Protector for Disdainful Stroke back, would at least deal with the Rhino permanently. Joe's hanging out with a Secure the Wasted hand, though, and that Gideon on the table with 4 loyalty.
Den Protector going to buy back a fetch land. which Andy will play.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it would have been difficult for Andy to fight this battle just on 4 lands. His spells are not as powerful as Joe's, so he needs to be casting 2 every turn.
Yeah, and when you, this is going to become difficult for him. If you look at Joe's hand, you mentioned Secure the Waste. He has that alongside Obzon Charm and Ultimate Price. So Joe actually has a lot of removal here.
Yeah, he's also representing Murderous Cut on the board right now. It's another thing for Andy to think about.
Deathmist Raptor is the second play for Ferguson.
And the other reason that I like getting this land back is that Sylvan Advocate is just worthless on the board as it stands. Getting the 6 lands will make that matter a lot more.
And a draw for Bernal. It's another Secure the Wastes. So 2 secures, Ultimate Price, and Obzon Charm.
Joe's posturing like he's going to do something this turn. Oh, looks like he is. Maybe feeling a little aggressive.
Well, keep in mind that Joe only has 1 black mana source right now. So while he can go for this Ultimate Price on Sylvan Advocate, which he's going to do, he cannot Obzon Charm anymore.
And that's one of the reasons that I don't like this play. Abstractly, I like casting Secure the Waste over that just because I think it's a lot more relevant impact on the current board state. But because he doesn't have double black, the fact that we're just leaving 3 mana on the table is also problematic.
Well, do you think he was worried about Lumbering Falls activating and hitting for 5?
It's definitely what Andy is representing, though. He's got a bunch of allies lying around, 2 on the table and the threat to continue making more. It wouldn't be a real concern of mine, not to mention that if we're leaving up Secure the Waste, we have chump blockers all day.
Yeah, I think if Obzon Charm mana was up here, then I can get behind Joe's line.
I'm wondering, considering that Joe has 2 Secure the Waste, the play might have been we're going to Ultimate Price something this turn and just make 2 tokens. That way, on our turn, we can Emblem with Gideon and then leave up the Secure the Waste for just 4 more tokens when Andy comes to crack.
I mean, that's something we see Jeff Hoagland with this style deck do all the time. Just to raise the alarm on 3 mana, and that is going to be Joe's play.
Yeah, his Siege Rhino was just hit with a Reflector Mage, so this is going to be doing some damage control for Gideon.
And we see the Deathmist Raptor and Bounding Crassus.
Yeah, he had nothing. He had no legal blocks for the Den Protector, so he couldn't save the Gideon from falling out of emblem range.
And the follow-up play for Ferguson is going to be Warden of the First Tree as we go back to Bernal. His hand, an Obzon Charm, a Siege Rhino, a land, and a Secure the Waste. He cannot play the Rhino this turn because of Reflector Mage.
So, looking back a turn, casting that Ultimate Price on the Advocate might have paid off a lot better aimed at the Den Protector, considering what transpired.
Well, the Advocate would have been a 4 or 5, so he just would have had to chump block it. But you mean you could have kept the Gideon at 4?
He's chump blocking anyway. He'd have the Gideon at 4, and then he could Secure the Waste for 2/2s a turn after.
It is a pretty big penalty that Gideon won't be able to make an emblem this game.
And the way to generate loyalty for Gideon is not anywhere near as relevant as the 2/2s on this board.
Obzon Charm will take care of the Den Protector. Gideon will make an ally. Joe's fighting very hard to protect this Gideon. With the way he is set up, he would need to secure if Andy were to swing. So Reflector Mage will attack the Gideon, and that'll get a chump block from Joe.
So Andy not attacking with the ability to pump the Warden suggests that he's got something to do with at least 4 of that mana.
Face down creature with 2 mana up. Can tell you what that one looks like.
I have a feeling he's planning to use all 5. Oh, he's got a 6 land too. And he's got that Deathmist Raptor hanging out in his graveyard. That'll be coming back into play when this creature flips face up.
Right now, there's not actually a card other than the Deathmist Raptor for Andy to get back.
So this is the turn where Joe can cast the Siege Rhino again.
Rhino back online. A draw of Murderous Cut for Joe Bernal. That's a very good one here.
Yeah, that's actually huge. Having a removal spell that he can cast the same turn as he casts a Rhino here.
Yeah, he has hit the second black mana source last turn. So now able to cast 2 spells.
Joe checking out Andy's graveyard.
Okay, it looks like Andy actually does have plenty other options for the Den Protector.
He knows the Den Protector when he sees one, no matter how much it looks like a spider.
Here's the Siege Rhino. Joe up to 13, Andy down to 8.
I guess the Khan's block morphs don't look like spiders, huh? They look like giant fireballs.
Yeah, they're the nameless blobs. If it's a manifest blob, it's blue instead of orange.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Everybody knows that. Den Protector, unmorphed. Looks like it got back a copy of Bounding Crassus. We see in Andy's hand Bounding Crassus, Sylvan Advocate, and Disdainful Stroke already.
I believe this is actually Andy's graveyard, and he's picking one of these.
Okay. Okay. That one makes more sense. It's going to go...
If that was his hand, this would actually be a very good position.
I was like, man, he's played all those. Sylvan Advocate's going to be his choice.
Andy coming off of casting Sphinx's Revelation.
Draw was Jace.
He has worse top decks.
Well, his graveyard's already fully stocked that Jace, 1 away from flipping. Now, a flipped Jace in his deck isn't actually as relevant here unless there's a collected company in the graveyard.
No, it's all collected company. We haven't seen a Dromoka's command out of him in post-sideboard games. May or may not have them.
Yeah, how do you actually feel about this as a Jace deck? When you're looking at cards like Disdainful Stroke and Ojutai's Command, it's less appealing.
So there's a lot more going on with Jace than just flashing back spells. One thing that Andy does have is the ability to just discard a Death Mist Raptor and then get it back when he unmorphs a Den Protector. I don't think he's a deck that cares a lot about ultimating it, but that interaction is something anyway.
Well, he'll play out the hand. End step, Murderous Cut will take care of Sylvan Advocate. And while Joe's tapped down, Andy will level up Warden. So 13 to 11 is still a good spot here for Joe, but the board's getting cluttered quickly.
It is, and Gideon is usually great on boards like this. Gideon on 1 loyalty, less excited about. It still matters, but the inability to actually make that emblem is going to be problematic for Joe. When he actually wants to punch through with his Secure the Waste, it's going to be for a lot less damage.
Well, how about a second Rhino from the Abzan? That usually is, most problems, that will start a solution to.
Second Rhino, third Rhino, fourth Rhino.
Yeah, there are very few things that can't fix.
These are lines that I suggest. If Joe has a Vampiric Tutor,
he could Vampire. Oh, he could Vampire. You'd Vampire Tutor for Siege Rhino?
I like that find.
So 2 Rhinos puts Andy down to 8. So we go back over to Andy Ferguson. Jace will loot. Believe that on that last turn, Joe did not add an ally to his board. It's just the 1 knight in play.
Yeah, the 1 loyalty Gideon matters even less when you don't do
when you
anything
don't make
with
the
it.
ally?
Yeah. In these cluttered board scenarios, it becomes a lot harder to remember triggers like that. And there's a lot going on. He's presumably thinking about how he's actually going to punch through, and just in the sweat here, I must have just forgot to trigger it.
We see Jace, and I like this play. So the Jace discarded a Dromoka's Command and then flipped into the Telepath Unbound. So it set itself up to flash back something.
Yeah, he knows this way that he still has access to the Dromoka's Command. He'd rather have the Sylvan Advocate in play. Now he can actually use the Advocate to fight with Dromoka's Command.
Yeah, he plays Sylvan Advocate. It's a 4/5. Now it looks like he's going to go for Dromoka's Command, turn it into a 5/6, Sylvan Advocate will fight down a Rhino.
Joe's been hanging out with one card in hand. Andy says, you got nothing. Let's see it if you do.
Yeah. And that's just going to work. And now here comes Death Mist Raptor at Gideon. It's a 3/3 Death Touch. The Knight ally will jump in front of it as we pass back to Joe. But now a lone Siege Rhino faces off against 5 creatures on Andy's side.
The draw was not a Siege Rhino. I believe it was a white card.
Looks like a Silk Wrap for the draw for the turn. There's plenty of good targets to Silk Wrap here.
Certainly.
But that's not the issue. It's that Andy's just burying him in card advantage.
Absolutely. And also, casting Silk Wrap here means we can only secure for 3 tokens.
All right, well, he's going to once again grab Sylvan Advocate from Andy. That'll be hit by the Silk Wrap. You know, Advocate's just been really impressive this game. That fact that it's a 4/5 for 2 has been so relevant. You know, Andy had a creature that he could use with Dromoka's command to fight down a Rhino, and he only had to pay 2 mana for it.
Right now, Andy is best known for eschewing Siege Rhino from his deck, and the fact that he has a 2 mana 4/5 makes him look pretty smart for doing it.
Yeah, this has been very impressive. This time, Gideon will make the ally. Here's a 2/2. Head in hands, Joe wondering just how he's going to get through these turns.
Yeah, when you have your face buried in your hands like that, usually doesn't mean that you have an easy path to victory.
Jace the Telepath Unbound will shrink Rhino down to a 2/5.
No longer able to block Den Protector.
So nothing on the board can block Den Protector. So here's the attack from Andy. It looks like Death Mist Raptor.
Finally killing that
Yeah.
Gideon. Attacking with the Death Distractor because it's pretty much free.
Joe would have to double block to kill it, and there's no way he can make that block. Just as an insurance policy, both of them went at Gideon. Andy wanted to be sure he took down the Planeswalker, so Joe did not have a trick and did not block. So Gideon off the board.
With Gideon dead, we are much further from parity.
And with that, we'll just pass back to Joe. Now, we're getting to the point where that Warden of the first tree is not... It's a 3/3 right now, but Andy with 6 lands in play, and I believe he has triple white. This could get ugly quickly.
6 untapped to... well, he only has to activate it 1 at the end step here, and then untap, do it again, attack for 1,000,000.
So the Warrior has now become a Spirit Warrior.
Double check by math, 16 less than 1,000,000. I think Joe's in trouble.
If Andy can deal that much. Yeah, you can. It's close. Here comes the three power guys, the Death Mist and Den Protector.
Andy very conscious of the fact that he is only on 8 life. The Warden's going to hang back. I actually like that quite a lot. The attack is not lethal, so.
Well, and it's not very difficult for him just to wait until the attack is lethal. You know, he can end step make the Warden an 8/8 and then make it a 13 and swing. Den Protector will chip Joe down to 13.
Once again, shrinking the Rhino so the Protector is unblockable. Demonstrating his mastery of basic math.
And a pass to Joe. This may be his last draw of the game. He still has Secure the Wastes. But once again, that's not actually a tool to be Den Protector.
No, and if we're using our Secure the Waste defensively, we just have nothing in the tank for when it's time to try to turn the corner.
All right, Warden of the first tree turns into an 8/8 on end step. Andy does sink all his mana into it. So now we have an 8/8 trample to accompany those 3 power attackers. Joe's still at 13, but now he has to be concerned that it might be lethal.
Yeah, we are easily in that territory. Yeah, now he's going to hang back with the Raptor. Still a great blocker, and the Warden. What could go wrong? Yeah,
Den Protector and Warden of the first tree are the attackers. The Den Protector 3/2. The Warden currently an 8/8, could make its way all the way up to 13.
If Joe has a removal spell, it's the last card in his hand anyway.
Guy's been hanging out at the first tree for a while, gotten very big while he was there.
Also, Joe playing that land when he has, 6, 7 lands already in play with 1 card in hand heavily implies that the card is Secure the Waste. You would just bluff with that land if it was anything else.
Yeah, you wouldn't play it out. 3 mana tramples over from the Warden, and 3 comes in from the Death Mist Trap, or rather from the Den Protector. So Joe will go down to 7. And with what it looks like, Joe should have 1 draw left.
Looks like he's going to go ahead and make 7 tokens here. Otherwise, he doesn't have access to that other card. He wants to use all his mana on this secure.
So one of the hopes for Joe was that he'd have a turnaround play, secure the waste, say, into 1 or 2 Gideons, maybe into Sorin. Now
he has those 4 Radiant Flames on his sideboard. We are well past the point of that mattering.
Yeah, that Warden of the First Tree would not care too much about Radiant Flames. But we can secure the wastes for 7. There are 2 blockers on Andy's side. So with a Sorin or a Gideon, Joe could push 10 damage.
Not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good play, but you're right. Andy's actually still at 16. So he would need 2 Anthem effects.
Andy is also going to be able to activate that Warden 2 more times before it has to turn sideways again.
So an army of soldiers for Joe.
Warden, an army of 1.
Yeah. Well, it's really just that trample on Warden that's making this hard for Joe.
The lifelink is big, too. Andy did gain 8 life on that last turn.
Yeah, put him well out of range. We'll see what Joe wants to do with all these soldiers.
Playing with his mana a lot.
Well, 4 ready. We might have a Planeswalker.
It looks like it's
Gideon.
Yeah, Gideon plus activate Shambling Ventus, where he doesn't have a 3rd white mana. Looks like, well, a 4th rather.
Yeah, he's close to it, but for the 4th white, he could. So he does have Gideon. This is a turnaround. But Andy's been very conservative in his attacks. It's just been Den Protector plus the Trampler. So despite the fact that Joe's put together this 1-2 punch, it may not be enough to get the job done.
If Joe had an Oath of Nissa, he'd be able to cast Gideon and activate Shambling Vent.
And we have actually seen that in some of these slower Abzan decks.
We have. He's got a bunch of Planeswalkers in his deck, too. Seems like a solid fit.
Obnixilis, Gideon, Sorin. Now, he is basically a 2-color deck. There are very few white cards in this list. Or rather, green cards. Can he get through this turn, even though he now has...
So another concern of Joe's, this is something I just realized, even though he's well behind in this game, there's barely over 7 minutes on the clock anyway. He's fighting really hard for a draw.
He's fighting for a draw, isn't he? Collected Company on end step for Andy. A near miss. It's going to be Bounding Crassus.
Well past the point of mattering.
He'll tap the ally. So first of all, he went for that instead of a pump, which means we may have another pair of turns in this game. If he just pumped the Warden, untapped, pumped the Warden again, I don't think Joe has enough toughness.
Mm-hmm. So now the Warden can become a 13 against 7 tokens. That punches that does punch in for lethal. The Shambling Vent can't activate.
Well, there's an emblem.
Oh, right.
But if he swings the entire team, then he's good. Now, that would be a concern because if Joe had, say, 1 Abzan Charm, Andy would lose the game making that kind of attack.
Mm-hmm. Joe is empty-handed.
So if Joe's empty-handed, then an Alpha Strike, I think, is still short, actually. It might just be his best move to swing Den Protector twice.
Yeah, Andy's got a Reflector Mage in hand. Not very important here.
I mean, you could use it. You could use it to get rid of a token. That's probably less damage than just pumping more mana into the Warden.
Right. I think that's all you want to be doing right now. I don't entirely understand the Collected Company there. I'm not sure what he wants to find, even. What is better than just 5 more counters?
Well, it does give him some insurance policy against a possible removal spell. Death Mist Raptor will swing. Just Death Mist Raptor will swing. Surprised that Den Protector didn't join on in.
Yeah, it's unblockable. It's not good
It's
to
a
block
two-turn
with.
clock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not good to block with.
A double block from Joe takes care of the Death Mist Raptor.
All right. Pair of Reflector Mages.
So Joe can't cast Soldier tokens or Knight Ally tokens this turn.
Can still cast Gideons and secure the wastes.
That doesn't work the way I was hoping it would work.
No, quite unfortunate. Now, Joe has very few draws here that matter. This is not enough mana to be one of them.
Silk
This
Wrap
is
was
fine.
the draw. It took care of Warden in the first tree. That is one that matters. I don't know if it's enough to win, but it was a good one.
That's above average. I don't know if it's in the realm of relevant.
Joe will wrap up the Warden. And can't really attack his 2/2s into a board of 2/3s and a 3/3.
With your opponent at 6, though, you know, they have to do a lot of blocking, so the 2/3s actually look really good, even on offense. Andy now up to 16.
An Alpha Strike from Andy looks really tempting here.
The Shambling Vent is once again online. That does confound it. It is a 3/4 because of the emblem.
And here's going to be a Collected Company. It gets Reflector Mage bouncing another token. Sylvan Advocate. This is almost certainly lethal. It's creatures number 6 and 7 for Andy. He now can swing out with 4 more attackers than Joe has blockers.
Though it was main phase, so it's going to be lethal next turn. Looks like an
Joe with one
Obnixilis.
draw. It's a good draw, but not going to pull him close enough for this attack.
It's not exactly a good redraw. Taps low of anything that really matters by casting Obnixilis.
Joe just counting it out, making sure that he has no outs here. Even if Obnixilis kills the largest creature, which is the Sylvan Advocate.
If you Obnixilis, use it to draw a card, and you draw Radiant Flames, you kill most of Andy's boards, but the Advocate and the Lumbering Falls are still around and lethal.
So that's not going to work.
No. And that's the best case scenario I came up with from casting Obnixilis.
Yeah, the other play is to kill Sylvan Advocate with Obnixilis. That's the most obvious play on the board. But as we see, that's not lethal right now.
Nope.
Or rather, it doesn't save Joe from being lethal.
Right. That too.
So he'll just have to pass and hope Andy plays around something. And Andy has been very conservative this game. He had many attacks on previous turns that would have been lethal. Now, I understand I'm not making them. There's a certain point where it's just safer to win slowly.
We see him fire up the Shambling Vet here. Sure sign of this Alpha Strike.
And there's everything. 1,
Joe's
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 creatures from Andy. Joe at 6. There's no way that 3 soldiers can hold this off.
The Shambling Vent kind of deals with 2 creatures, right? It gains 3 life, but I think we're still pretty far off.
All right, and there we have it. So Andy Ferguson, Bant Company, taking down Joe Bernal. He improves to 9-1, looking for back-to-back top 8s with different company decks.
Yeah, those tempo swings are just huge. The Reflector Mage wasn't so much what mattered in the game that we saw on camera there. As a matter of fact, Dramoka's command really shined more than anything. The ability to actually tango with the Siege Rhinos instead of trying to tempo them out.